Evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to this evening's Colors of Glory virtual meet. I am Aparna Chandrasekharan, a life member of the Colors of Glory Foundation and your MC for this event. This is one in a series of virtual meets we have been hosting since the pandemic set in 2020, the frequency of which has widened after we have resumed our in-person events in June last year. While the regular attendees of our events do not need to be told what our organization is about, kindly bear with me through a brief introduction for the sake of the new attendees, whom we are delighted to welcome. Traditionally, our country never lacked organizations celebrating our heritage in almost every sphere of human activity, be it art, literature, or politics. However, for whatever reasons, warfare alone does not really enjoy this privilege, despite our rich military legacy. It is this grave anomaly that our founders set out to rectify by raising the Colors of Glory Foundation, the first of its kind in India 7 years ago. Today, we are proud to assert that we have carved a niche for ourselves, celebrating the heroism of our men and women in arms, past and present, through innumerable events, outdoor and indoor, varying from battle reenactments, exhibitions, and commemorative marathons to documentary shows and intercollegiate and interschool military history quizzes, as well as talks and seminars. Our website features nearly 150 popular blogs, some of which have been published as articles in the Journal of the USI, the United Service Institution of India, the oldest and the most authentic defense publication in the country. We have a pan-Indian membership base of both armed forces veterans and civilian gentry, and some overseas members as well. While we are well on our way bouncing back with our in-person events after the pandemic lull, we are confident of scaling loftier heights as we go on. We will continue to host the virtual meets to reach out to our national and international audience. We also endeavor to host some in-person outreach programs in other cities in the near future, commencing with Bangalore. Meanwhile, we invite all of you who are not our members of our organization to join us in our unique mission. Please visit our website to know how to join. I'm now delighted to give you all a brief glimpse of the road we have traveled so far through a video, which of course is only a part of the story because it depicts only outdoor events, the major ones, while the innumerable indoor and virtual meetings that we've held do not feature in it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event is an interactive session where our distinguished guest, Mr. Shiv Kunal Verma, will be in conversation with our founder, Captain D.P. Ramachandran. You're all welcome to join the conversation after the session has ended. We have amongst us a very special member of ours who is best placed to introduce the panelists. Colonel A. Krishnaswamy, Veer Chakra and VSM at Bar is a contemporary of Major General Ashok Kalyan Verma, the father of Mr. Shiv Kunal Verma. And they both served together as platoon commanders in the Indian Military Academy way back in 1962, when Shiv Kunal was still a young boy. Captain Ramachandran is, of course, a fellow veteran of the Colonel in the 1971 Bangladesh War. Colonel Krishnaswamy, sir, may I now request you to do the honors of introducing our speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, Colonel A. Krishnaswamy, am grateful to the Colors of Glory Foundation for choosing me, an octogenarian, war-decorated veteran, for this onerous duty of introducing the panelists for today's event. It's my honor and proud privilege to introduce Shiv Kunal Verma and Captain D.P. Ramachandran, who are going to partake in a delightful conversation. Both have won accolades and recognition in the literary field. Shiv, I have a few interesting details to share with you to take you down the memory lane. In 1963, I've seen you as a young kid playing in the children's park opposite your house in Prem Nagar, IMA Dehradun. Your illustrious dad, then Captain Ashok Verma, and I were instructors in the Indian Military Academy. Both of us had taken part in the 1962 war. We were friendly neighbors, staying in adjoining bungalows, and served A Battalion as platoon commanders, instructors to train the gentlemen cadets. To you, all your dad's colleagues were uncles. You may recollect two amongst them who are very close to your very dad, Narsiman and Sushil Pillai.
Yeah.
I, Krish, was a junior colleague and, of course, a coursemate of your dad's younger brother, Vijay Verma of the Rajput Regiment. Ramu, you and I have served the nation while fighting the Indo-Pak War of 1971 in the eastern sector, assisting in the creation of the new nation called Bangladesh. You as a tankman in the hilly sector, and I as an infantryman in the Joydepur Dhaka sector. We met again after our retirement in Chennai and are committed to promote our cherished goals. You and I have also shared platforms to describe our battle actions to thrilled audiences with first-person narratives straight from our heart. Now, Ramu, I must also say that you have the army genes in your system. You are methodical, systematic, thorough in planning, believe in punctuality. You are a team man and obtain willing cooperation from all. As a founder and lifetime patron of your brainchild, the Colors of Glory, you have promoted cordiality and camaraderie amongst the armed forces personnel and the civilian gentry, and have created a niche in the hearts of the people. We pray for success in all your ventures. Now let me do the formal introduction of our panelists. Shiv Kumar Verma was born into an army family, more precisely 2nd Rajput, which is his father battalion. His childhood was tempered by the fact that during 1962, most of the infantry battalions were then posted in field areas, and he was brought up under the watchful eye of his remarkable mother. After the initial schooling in St. Joseph's Academy, Dehradun, and later on a year in Fort Benning in the United States, he moved to Doon School, an institution that would shape his entire outlook towards life. Subsequently, he joined the Madras Christian College at Chennai for his graduation. Subsequently, he became a journalist, a filmmaker, and a writer. He worked briefly with India Today, the Associated Press, and Sanctuary Films before teaming up with his associate Deepthi Balla to form Kalidia India. They shot and produced some of the classic films like Salt of the Earth, the standard bearers in 1969 and 1959. He filmed the Kargil War. During the last decade and a half, he has authored some exceptionally good books that include Northern Trilogy, 1962, The War That Wasn't, and 1965, The Western Sunrise. Presently, he is working on value education program for schools and colleges that aim at bringing India to the Indians. Now, Ramachandran, BP, in the earlier stages of the Indo-Pak War in 1971, he was a young, swashbuckling, black beret-wearing captain, second in command of an armored squadron. In the 1971 war, he ended up commanding the squadron by default when his squadron commander left for another assignment. Captain Ramachandran performed commendably well under fire on all accounts. This is borne out by the fact that an article of his exploits of his squadron during the operations was one of the few selected ones for publication in the USA to commemorate the journal that it had brought out after the historic victory of the 1971 war. Once a soldier, always a soldier. Although he made a mark in the corporate sector after leaving the army at the end of his short service contract of 10 years, his fascination for the armed forces and their history never diminished. He authored 3 books, several articles on military history over the years. Post-retirement, he has embarked on a journey to promote awareness of India's military heritage and has been working with a missionary zeal to develop his brainchild, the Colors of Glory Foundation. It is our country's first NGO with such a mission. Over to you, Ram, for your delightful conversation. Thank you.
Wish, let's have the spotlights on both of us. Yeah, that's better. It's an honor to have you here. I mean, before we get into a dialogue, first let me congratulate you on this wonderful book you have written. I've just finished reading it last week, really. A brilliant piece of writing. And I loved it. I mean, I think you're freewheeling with your thoughts and hammering it onto the keyboard. Looks like that. I mean, it comes out of something like a speech delivered extempore. Beautiful. I mean, I'm myself a lover of informal writing. This is wonderful. The book. I mean, we'll come to that later. I've noted down, I'm scribbled down a few points so that we can focus on what people want to hear. Your path-breaking book, 1962, The War That Wasn't, graphically depicts a disastrous political military equation preceding the war, the infamous elevation of PM called to command 4 corps holding NFA, and all that followed. One grave concern of the veteran community at large today is an eerie similarity with 1962 that many observe on our current border situation in China. Indeed, we have bolstered our defenses with troop build-up and related infrastructure, but one gets the impression that the government is not taking the armed forces into its confidence and doing what is tactically and strategically sound, principally guided by the Ministry of External Affairs and National Security Advisor. Our vacating the vantage points atop Kailash Heights and taking it lying that we cannot access 26 of the 65 petroleum points in eastern Ladakh are cases in point. Our failure to call their bluff would only make the Chinese more belligerent, but the government seems to be shy of taking risks, pretending everything is hunky-dory. What would be your take on this?
Good evening, sir. First of all, it's an absolute privilege to be here, sir. And I'd like to thank Colonel Krishnaswamy for his very kind words and to all of you for having invited me. As part of the introduction, they also talked about the Salt of the Earth film. And it's wonderful to have Marshal Vartaman here, who was one of my principal actors. And in fact, Shobha ma'am was complaining we clipped out some of his scenes from the film, which we had to, because we were dealing, that was the only thing that we were told to cut in the whole film, because it was about the Y bomb. I'll come to that at some other point later during this conversation. Uh, so 1962 was perhaps the most difficult book I've written because, I was 2 years old and I the memories, of course, I was too young to remember anything myself. But the family was so badly hit by it that it actually completely sort of dominated my entire growing years. And my father was in particular very. I mean, everything was about two Rajput. It was we knew all these guys. Everybody had died. About 280 people had died. The battalion didn't exist anymore. So the constant conversations at home, etc., they were going on and on. So it took me a long time. And in fact, my own career graph, whether I was in Tiger Tops or later I was doing the Northeast trilogy or whatever, I was always working on the 1962 book because I took every opportunity I could to visit the bunkers, to go and see the ground for myself. And I think the book eventually reflects that. It was it was a very depressing book to write. And in fact, I used to keep telling my wife, I really wonder who's going to read it because, it's a story of a defeat. Everybody likes to read about putting the tricolor on top of a hill, but what do but it had to be written. I had to write this book from not only my dad, but I had to also write it for all those who had actually died and their families. I just tried to be very honest and tried to see, as a military historian, you can never be absolutely certain about all the facts because all of you have been combat veterans and you know that you have three people in one particular action and you ask them to give their perspective of what happened, you'll get three different stories. The only thing that will probably be common is the fact, the date and the venue and the area. Otherwise, everything else. And warfare also heightens your perception of life. So everybody has a different take on it. So again, you have to weed your way through the entire thing and try and find out exactly hua kya tha. Having said that, sir, the book was, of course, it took me a long time to write it, and I was also very fortunate that my MCC colleague, he was 1 year senior to me. He was David. Davida was had also made quite a name for himself as the editor of Penguin. He was very keen that I actually do this book under the banner of Alum, which is perhaps the leading publishing house in India today in terms of prestige. So what this did was it actually brought the book into the mainstream. We had a lot of military books which had come out. They had been published by Natraj or they'd been published by Lancer. They had not really been put out into the mainstream. And actually, 1962 was perhaps a pathbreaker in many ways. I was honestly quite surprised at the kind of reaction we got to the book. At one level, I was not surprised because I knew exactly what I had actually done. I don't, and it kind of went along the lines I expected it to go. But then, every book you expect it to do well, but you need a bit of luck for it to actually make a mark for itself. A book is like a child, I mean, which is leaving college. Once it's off your table, it creates its own destiny. And all you can then do is sit and watch and see how it goes. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of similarity since, I mean, I've been speaking about the book on various forums, especially we've also taken it to schools. So we've taken military history. What we are doing is also similar to what Colors is doing. For the last 7 years, we have been running the military history seminar in Vellum Boys. Mr. Darshan Singh is the chairman there. And this has become a major calendar event for schools. In fact, we have all the tops in India participating every year. This is our 7th edition this year. And, we are all it's had quite an impact. And what's important is that Vellum Boys is now the first school actually in India 7 years ago to introduce military history as into its to its students. I won't say into its curriculum, but to its students. And this is something which is actually a very big lacuna in our society because even in the National Defense Academy and Indian Military Academy, we actually do not teach military history. So we just completely bypass that. Uh, well, it also, a book like that also that gets you to talk about what is going on in the contemporary scenario. And yes, there are a lot of similarities. It does it does ring alarm bells in not only my head, but in perhaps a lot of other people's heads. Uh, One of the things which I remember speaking to the IDSA about almost a decade ago. And one of the things I had said, I think this was 2010, sir, my Long Road to Siachen, the book had just come out. And I was asked to speak there. And this was I remember saying, and that time there was no trouble on the northern boundaries with China. Everything had been kind of static. But I referred to a speech which Mao Zedong had made, which the Indian ambassador had been present, Mr. Panikkar, and he had not reported it because this was before the 62 thing actually exploded, where he had actually spelt out on a public forum that they were going to attack us. And he had said that we are going to attack them. We're going to teach India a lesson. We will do this. We will do this. We will even withdraw. He even said that. And then he said, 50 years from now, we'll do it again. And just to, have a psychological advantage on the Indian side, and we'll give them another slap. And I referred to this and I said, listen, in 2012, we can actually expect trouble because it doesn't matter who's the person in charge or who the new president is or what the dispensation is. The little red book in the Chinese mind has a very special meaning. If it says in that attack India in 50 years later, you expect trouble in 2012. We did have, things went exactly the same way. In fact, they came into the Temchok, they came into the DBO area for the first time in 2012. And at that time, the army commander was General Parnaik, and he reacted very positively. He took some countermeasures, went into the Chumar region, etc. So that face-off actually died off in 2012. But the reason I'm raising this is that if you are fully aware of what has actually happened and you are looking at things from a historical point of view, it always allows you to join a lot of dots which otherwise you may or completely miss. There is what happened in 2012 was actually a precursor to what subsequently happened in 2020. And unfortunately, I still feel that we continue to be a little reactive. The Chinese have been calling the shots. We have been reacting to it. And you referred to the Kailash range and everything. So the fact is that one really is not privy because now there is there's almost a complete blanking out of information which is coming out of the Ladakh area since 2020. There's not too much that is very clear. In fact, sometimes we used to talk about the fact that in 62 we didn't know what's going on, but I think the situation in 2020 was also somewhat similar. Because one of the other problems we are now facing in today's world is that part of warfare is also information warfare. So there is a narrative, there's a counter narrative. So it's difficult to actually separate the chaff from the wheat. But yeah, we are. It was surprising that we actually withdrew from the Kailash range because that certainly gave us a tremendous tactical advantage. Because you see the Spangur gap in that particular area, you're then occupying those heights and you're looking at them down the Spangur gap, and you know how it is. You have to have the high ground. That's one of the reasons why we can never take Aksai Chin back, because you can't possibly, from the Shyok River, you have to vertically climb up to get there if you ever decided to do that, which is a separate issue. So yeah, it's been I sometimes really feel that 62 lessons have not been adequately been ingrained into us. So I can't hear you.
Ramasa, you're muted.
Yeah. It's okay. I once read an interesting analysis of the 1965 war by a Pakistan army officer. He went on to suggest that the war turned out to be more or less a stalemate for the principal reason that both the armies had many senior commanders who were discredited officers as questionable track record. I remember him mentioning Niranjan Prasad on the Indian side, and he attributed this tendency to the blue-eyed boy syndrome who the armies suffer from. I was reminded of it when I read the Misra episode of Dashuganj in your latest book, Life of an Hindustani. I mean, an officer deserted his command, abandoning his troops, being given a second chance, and even a gallantry award being doled out to him sounded abominable to me. I had some bizarre experience myself of such happenings during the 1971 war. Unfortunately, I haven't read your book on 1965 war, but would you endorse the view that our armed forces suffer from such a terrible affliction of undeserving characters being propped up? Yes.
So firstly, the Niranjan Prasad episode, in my opinion, is a great injustice to the man. He was removed in 62 after the Ramkachu attack, and his divisional headquarters were in Zimitang, and he had fallen back to Tawang, which was actually a vital area for us, and we were actually very well equipped in Tawang. So we had over 7,000 Assam Rifle troops there. And unfortunately, the army commander that time, Bogi Sen, landed up by helicopter, and instead of reinforcing the success that we had initially had at Bumla, 5 Assam Rifles had performed reasonably well, so had 1 6er. General Bogi Sen decided to sack the divisional commander and also take the decision to abandon Tawang, which actually led to absolute chaos in the overall. 5 also, so there is in my book I've talked about it. You see, Niranjan Prasad was a very interesting character. He had been a forward air controller. He was initially in the army and then he moved to the Air Force. He had been a forward air controller even in the Battle of Mektila and stuff like that in the Arakans, and he had performed with tremendous courage. In fact, so much so that the Air Force asked for him to be transferred to the Air Force. And he actually commanded, I think it was 8th Squadron, which was flying Tufanis, or not Tufanis, sorry, Walti Vengeances and stuff like that. He performed extremely well there. And then after that, he came back to the army. And again in 1947-48. So he was, very few people know this, but at the Battle of Shalatang, he was the forward air controller who honed in the Tempest, which came in and attacked those radar columns and stuff like that, and actually turned the thing. I don't think his courage is really can be disputed. He was a very, on the ground, a leopard never changes his spots. He certainly can't become a coward. In the build-up to the 65 war also, he had been, during the Op Ablaze period where the chief, General Chaudhary, and the army commander, General Harbaksh, they were at loggerheads most of the time and could rarely agree on anything. And when the whole plan of the attack on Lahore was being planned, Niranjan Prasad had repeatedly said that without air cover, especially on the GT road, we are going to be sitting ducks. And that is exactly what happened. And later on, in fact, he was just brushed aside by Jogi Dhillon, who was the 11 Corps commander, and by the army commander. And it's exactly what happened. So when the attack took place on the 6th or 7th of September, when the advance took place, 3 Jat actually got across the Ichugal Canal. But all the B and F echelon vehicles were shot up. The Indian Air Force was simply not pushed in to do anything, despite 33 SU sitting in Amritsar. They would have seen the Pakistani aircraft coming in, and the Pakis had a field day because despite our pilots all sitting, waiting to get called up, they never were. So, and then Niranjan Prasad was sacked. So he became a scapegoat. In my opinion, the fact is somebody needs to speak up for him. And I have done so in the 65 book. The problem in 62, sir, was actually the fact that the defense minister, Mr. Chauhan, when he came, he had a single point brief, which was that the prime minister should not have anything pointed at him. So in that process, they completely whitewashed over what happened in 1962, sir. So officers who had actually deserted, got up and run from there, were not brought to book. In fact, they just continued. And, one of them was this gentleman called Brigadier R.N. Mishra, who commanded 311 Brigade later in the 71 war. Again, to use the same term again, leopard doesn't change his spots. And he was one of the 3 brigade commanders who was cashiered for stealing gold. Because, golf bags worth of it were found. And then the entire history got rewritten somewhat because the man was in disgrace. So you're not going to build him up. So a lot of people got away with that. And I think, in India, we have to learn to that. I mean, I've seen this in the Kargil war also, so that I think we are too quick to give awards and immediately announce them. And then we have to write citations to suit the awards to the overall situation. And then how do you possibly you cannot be very objective if you've already given somebody an MVC or a VRC or even any award for that matter. It doesn't have to be a PVC. Then the story gets colored, sir. Then that is where the problem is actually, as far as military history is concerned in India, that we get carried away by our own rhetoric, sir. Rhetoric is one thing, but serious military history is another thing. Because how else are you going to learn lessons from what happened if you're not going to tell the truth, sir?
I could agree with you more. It's continue with the same thread. I feel in our obsession with individual stories and heroisms, we often miss out on the collective bravery. I've even heard of units that go into action with citations prepared in advance. Instead, if they focused on training and winning battles, they could do much better. A well-trained unit is like a well-oiled machine. It doesn't need any individual heroes. I mean, that's what my feeling is. The heli lift of troops ordered by General Sagat Singh and executed by Group Captain Chandan Singh during the Bangladesh War was a case in point. It was a brilliant operation, which was in fact the game changer that led to the fall of Dhaka. Somehow, the operation was never accorded the fame it deserved. Maybe because it was executed with absolute professionalism without the loss of a single helicopter. In fact, people in our forum learned of it in detail only because not only the push point, the task force commander happened to make a presentation. It's collective bravery that we should work on. That's what one feels. What would you say to that?
So that's a very interesting thing you brought up, because actually the Narsingdi heli lift cannot be looked at in isolation either. It needs to be seen in conjunction with the Battle of Ashuganj. Now, the Battle of Ashuganj this is again 311 Brigade. 311 Brigade, I had 3 battalions. It had 10 Bihar, which was commanded by Colonel Sani. It had 4 Guards, which was originally 1 Rajput, which was commanded by Colonel Himmat Singh, later Lieutenant General, and 18 Rajput, which was commanded by my fathers. And they had attacked Akhoda earlier when the war broke out on the 5th. And Akhoda was a twin city of Agartala. They were not, in the initial, I've seen the appreciations which have been written independently of what subsequently after the war. And the casualties that we expected in Akhoda was something which was supposed to be mind-boggling, because Akhoda was supposed to be a very difficult nut to crack. Before that, before the war had actually started, there had been that action in Dhalai, which is a tea garden area more to the northern side of Sylhet and all that area. Now, what happened there was that we went in for a frontal attack on the Pakistani position, and we suffered very heavy casualties, including the brigade commander. General Yadav was shot in the foot. Tom Pandey came in his place, and we had casualties which were tremendous. So we were still thinking on those lines when Akhoda had been planned, but Akhoda went like a knife through hot butter, because basically it was my dad. So that's one of the reasons I haven't yet sat down and written the 71 book. But actually, he had been in Fort Benning I was a major, but in 69, and he had attended the Allied Officers Course, Infantry Officers Course. And that was the height of the Vietnam War, sir. And there were a lot of lessons which he had imbibed, and he had come back to India and then taken over 18 Rajput. And I think he put some of those to he operationally brought that into play in Akhoda. And actually, so 18 Rajput had 3 or 4 dead in Akhoda, where we were expecting about 150 killed from each battalion. The attack was led by 18 Rajput with 10 Bihar in support, and 4 Guard was the reserve battalion. Now, 4 days later, sir, you see, General Manekshaw's plan was to get to the Meghnasar and declare that area as a liberated area of Bangladesh. I don't think Dhaka up till this point was an objective at all. It wasn't. Again, sir, there is a Ashugan, the geography is very important because the old railway line which existed in the pre-independence period, Meghna is a huge river. It's about 3 or 4 kilometers wide. And the bridge on the Titas actually links Ashugan with Brahmanbadia on the other side. And the railway line used to come from the north and swing around like this and then go to this thing. And there it bifurcated. You could go to Sylhet to the north or you could go back to Dhaka. The 18 Rajput was told that was asked to lead the attack yet again, and Ten Bihar was yet again the reserve battalion and the support battalion, and one squadron of not even a squadron, so a troop of tanks, PT-76s from 63 cavalry, and they were told that 2 or 3 Pakistani companies holding the area, the defenses on the bridge, and then try and get across. But when the attack was launched, sir, we found that there was an entire Pakistani brigade still on this side. And it became quite a desperate kind of a situation because the battalion got completely hemmed in. Now, while the fighting was taking place, the Pakistanis started to withdraw across the bridge. And one of the most incredible actions, which I personally thought the man deserved a PVC for, was Major T.L. Sharma. He actually tried to take that bridge. While the Pakistanis were trying to disengage, he actually sprinted across that bridge. He got almost a kilometer before a machine gun burst, hit him on the head and brought him down, sir. And then they blew up the 2 spans of the bridge, etc. Now, General Sagat Singh was one of the most versatile and, he was thinking way beyond what everybody else was because General Manekshaw was a wonderful person, great motivator, but he was also going in for a battle of attrition, which is exactly the mistake we had made in 1965. But Sagat Singh was thinking differently. And sitting in a helicopter up there, he had a bird's eye view of what's going on. He landed back. He got hold of Chandan Singh, who happened to be his cousin also. And he said, listen, can you put this whole fleet of me force together and let's just lift the reserve battalion, which was 4 guards, and drop them at Narsingdi. And it went like clockwork because once the Air Force is given a task, and I know Air Marshal Bhatt here, but my own experience with the Air Force is you tell them at the last minute what you want, you'll get A1 results because they're very good at crisis management. They came together, they lifted everybody, then they got across. That changed the face of the war. So basically, it's Ashuganj and Narsingdi which suddenly opened the gates to Dhaka. Because the other mistake which the Pakistanis made was that after they withdrew from Ashuganj and came there, and Sagat Singh saw this, the brigade, not only the brigade, the entire division which was involved, the other 2 brigades were sitting in Brahmanbaria, actually instead of falling back on Dhaka to the south, actually went off to the north to reinforce the garrison at Sylhet. And that is what was General Sagat Singh's absolute brilliance, that he could see an opening and he could exploit it. And that is exactly what he did, sir. And full marks to here for the first time, I think the Air Force and the Army really came together in a joint operation. And it was fabulous.
You hit the nail on the head when you said, this was it made because as you said, Dhaka was, as per the plans, we're all there. It was all being told. Dhaka was not an objective to begin with. It all happened later because General Sagat changed the equation. It is not that he alone had the chance. In fact, General Raina with the second Corps was actually very close to Ganges, as they call it. And
Yes.
there was contingency plan for crossing over with backwater navy and what have you. But he was dragging his leg. That's a fact. Even General Jacob was mentioned this book. So, whereas General Sagat was totally of a different make, as he has shown earlier also. This certainly made the whole difference for getting knocked out. Now, incidentally, you narrate the Ashugan battle, you talk about Rajendra Mohan and all. He was a youngster with us, having the same regiment. And some other people also, you said, like Puka, all youngsters in the Navy. So you mean regiment. Now, going back to the Yeah, this same thing you're just talking about, the Ashok and this battles which were, I mean, you're saying that the battle of attrition, the hilly battle, which, I mean, 8 guards, I think, lost something like over 200 officers have been killed. Wasn't actually, because I was there, I was gotten. It never, we never got the credit. Actually, it is when we outflanked and took the brigade headquarters to the rear that Hilly fell. A frontal attack by infantry was not at all called upon, but it was resorted to. I mean, I don't know, even the brigadier Ahmed Go there, he also sort of endorsed it. I was just, Captain, what could I say? This? You're all asking, why is it being done? They did it. And those casualties could have been avoided. And even northwest sector where the maximum troops were deployed, and this excellent tank country, we could have moved faster. No, we were rained in 24 hours. We told wait, enemy, the imagined enemy dispositions. It is all a for that. One has to give entire credit to now going back to the 1962 war. There are two interesting revolutions appearing in life of an Hindustani. One is that interaction of the Chinese consulate, you saw photographs of rope on rope, captured weapons and equipment of the Indian Army returned by the PLA after the war. Apparently, our troops were not that badly equipped as it was made out to be. We did indeed suffer a defeat, as you suggest, even if it was panic-induced due to poor command and control. That being the case, has a clinical analysis ever been made to identify the fault lines and fix those? After all, even the Henderson Brooks report has still not been made public.
I don't think it ever will be so, because I'm talking about the Henderson Books report. I think, what most people have seen, and including what Neville Maxwell and everybody had initially put out, and even people in the know have seen later, the Henderson Brooks report actually, what most people have seen is the summary, sir, which was actually written by General Chaudhary himself. He had typed it down and everything. And I think the original Henderson Brooks report, there is one, it's again, of course, it's conjecture on my part, but you see, John Dalby, Brigadier John Dalby, had been the deputy commandant in IMA before he moved to 15 Corps, and then from there immediately he was sent as the brigade commander to 7th Brigade in Nifa. He had a very good equation with General, that time Brigadier Prem Bhagat. And I think one of the things which the author of the Henderson Books report is Brigadier Prem Bhagat, General Prem Bhagat later. And I think what he has taken that map, which Brigadier John Dalby also refers to in his book Himalayan Blunder, where he actually claims that the actual boundary ran along the Hatungla Ridge and not the Thagla Ridge. That means the Namkachu is actually on the Chinese side. Now, if that map is actually a part of your Henderson Books report, I don't think we can ever declassify it, regardless of which government is there, because in that case, you have your top commander saying we were completely in the wrong area. But I think the problem is deeper. The issue here is that the Hatungla Ridge could not have been the international boundary. If you follow unfortunately, when the McMahon line was also drawn up, sir, the Bailey and Morshed, the two captains who had done this before the Shimla agreement in 1914. 1913, they had done this expedition. They had gone in from the Diban River in Nifa. They had got up to the Yongyapla. They couldn't cross from Yongyapla. They tried to cross from Bandarala, couldn't do that. Then again, they tried Yongyapla. They got across. And they did a remarkable job of actually surveying and marking the watershed. Now, when you're accepting the fact that if that Bumla is on your side of the watershed, and that, that is the defenses to the north of Tawang, above Tawang, then that same ridge is what comes down, and it is divided by the Namgyang Chu River, which is the Namkachu flows into that. And it then carries on as the Thagla Ridge. So I cannot imagine that you can come down a ridge, hit a river, then move 1.5 kilometers down and get onto another ridge. But this logic has been, I have an educated guess that is probably there. That is the reason why they're not going to do it, sir. The biggest problem in the 62 thing was that the boundaries were not known, and again, I've said this a short while ago. We have to try and tell the truth, sir. There's been so much made about cotton shirts and trousers, etc., that we've started believing it. But the fact is that we were much better equipped than the Chinese were, sir. The two battalions which were thrown into the actual conflict, which was 19GR and 2 Rajput, were two battalions which were not supposed to be there. 2 Rajput had handed over to 6 Kumaon in Walong, and they were actually moving out. They were on their way to Mathura when they were stopped at Chardua to do some jungle trading before they proceeded to Mathura. And while they were there, the Dhola incident happened, and there was absolute panic. 19GR had handed over to four grenadiers, and they had also both battalions without tools in their Angola shirts and just this thing. They were the ones who were told to go back. Now, 9 Punjab, which was on the flank of the of 2 Rajput, occupying the defenses on the Namkachu, was fully equipped. So was 4 grenadiers. Both these battalions were fully equipped. Now, forget about them. As I said, there were 7,000 troops, Assam Rifle troops in Tawang. So when we have pulled out of Tawang because of Boghi Sen's rather impulsive order to pull out, we've left an entire battery of a regiment of 25 pounders. We had 25,000 sleeping bags which were set on fire at the helipad, and they continued to smolder for days. I mean, we just, so equipment was not an issue here. The other issue, which again, a lot has been written, is about the fact that we had World War II vintage Lee Enfield rifles and they had AK-47s. Frankly, sir, there was no comparison because our troops knew how to use that Lee Enfield. And a 303, all of you are trained on it in IMA and all that. You hit a man on the head, on the hand, he will sit down. AK-47, I mean, like my book starts with the story of Subedar Darshat Singh. He got hit 24 times, he still survived. It's, okay. And our troops knew how to use those weapons. The Chinese did an appreciation also, sir, right in the beginning, where Mao Zedong and all, they analyzed, they got the general who had visited India, who talked about the exercise which General Kaul had done in Ambala. And he had pointed out 2 basic things as weaknesses in Indian troops. And he had said, one, that if you get behind them, which is what they did in the Namkachu, they are, they're caught on the wrong foot because they don't really know what to do then. And the second thing he said was that the battalion on the right will not come to the aid of the battalion on the left. And this was the point which they very clearly made. Now, again, you also asked me about the meeting I had with the consulate in the military attaché in Delhi. Now, what happened there was I called him up on an impulse. I was researching a book, and when you're writing, you're looking at any source you can get. So I thought, what the heck? What do I lose here? So I rang him up, and I was firstly taken aback because the exchange itself spoke to me in absolutely Shuddh Hindi. Now, my Hindi is perfectly fine, but if somebody starts throwing Shuddh Hindi at me, I get thrown. So I was a little taken aback. And I said, I want to speak to the MA. And she said, Shahanji, no problem. And she put him. And the man was on the line and he said, I'm Colonel so-and-so. And again, he is speaking to me in Hindi. And I didn't know, then he asked me, he says, I said, can I come and see you? He says, when do you want to come? Abhi aajo, come today. I said, fine, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. So he laughed and he said, Indian Standard Time or... I said, I'll be there. I'm telling you, 3 o'clock, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. He was waiting for me on the road. He was waiting for me on the gate. I came in from the, the US Embassy side. They have a gate at the side. And we went and we sat there and we had a cup of tea in his office. And when I said, look, I'm researching this and stuff like that, he says, a lot of our records will not make sense to you because old Chinese, new Chinese. I don't know, he gave me some evasive answer on that. But basically, they made available a couple of files and they also said, why don't you we'll send you this film. So the next day, this major from the PLA lands up at my house and gives me a disc, not disc, a pen drive on which uh, there were these film clips of, it was a propaganda movie made by them, but it is all about our troops. It even has Brigadier Dalvi surrendering. It has. So I was watching this in my study, and my dad happened to be in Gurgaon, and I said, come and see this. And he was like incredulous. He says, "Ye to Balbir hai, ye to ye hai, ye to ye mera company hawaldar tha. What the where the hell did you get this bloody film from?" I said, "The Chinese gave it to me." And the amazing part is that film's on YouTube. Anybody can see it. The best part is even when they withdrew, sir, they said at Dirang Dizong, when they said that they cleaned up all our weapons, they lined up all our vehicles, and that shot is there in the film. And it really makes you wonder what the heck are we talking about? Because line upon line of one-ton vehicles, line upon line of weapons, line upon line. So, we were fully equipped. In fact, it's the Chinese, sir, who didn't have proper equipment. In fact, they were in those cotton padded khaki kind of stuff which they were using. And they were pretty lucky. In fact, in Dirang Dizon, they had actually, after they'd come across the other Sela, the one spelled with a T, they were at their wits' end. They wanted to surrender. And they fired off those last few rounds, and that was enough for panic on our side. So suddenly everybody ran away. I mean, it was just shamefully disastrous. But getting, it was interesting. In fact, I got the title of the book from well, not exactly from the Chinese MA, because I was thinking about it otherwise also. But the war that wasn't, I mean, because even the Chinese said it wasn't, how do you call this a war? It was just one brigade versus that was involved over there, one brigade over here, and 2 or 3 hours of fighting over here, 4 hours of fighting over there. I mean, why are you calling it a war? It's a border clash, is what they say.
According to Boris Commission.
But it's a fact, you can't run away from it.
Yeah, the second point that revelation, the second is that a senior ranking Air Force officer revealed to you that contrary to public perception, holding back the Air Force was not altogether a decision by Nehru alone. This Air Force officer had flown recce missions over Burma during the Second World War and found it nearly impossible to locate the Japanese in the jungles below, and felt that our pilots flying even faster aircraft in 1962 would not be able to locate the Chinese troops. He therefore felt using the Air Force could only be counterproductive, since it would cause the Chinese to escalate the conflict, and advised Nehru accordingly. I'm missing the officer's name among so many of the top brass that appear in your narrative, but you know who it was. Maybe not using the Air Force was not entirely a political decision. Don't you think it sort of exonerates Nehru of that part of the sin?
Well, I can't exonerate him because he was the defense minister during that war. It wasn't Krishna Menon, as most people believe. The defense minister during the war was Nehru himself. The Air Force officer was later the CNC in 1971, Air Marshal Diwan, and I had actually gone to interview him in connection with the 71 wars. 62 wasn't on my radar, and in fact, as a group captain or air commodore, he had actually been ACS Ops. I wasn't aware of it when we had this interview with him, and I remember this interview was a beautiful winter afternoon. We were sitting on his roof in Defense Colony, I think it was in Delhi. And when we finished talking to him about 71, I started to, wrap up my equipment, my Walkman recorders and all that. And he said, "Sit down, I want to tell you something." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I haven't been given enough credit for my role in 62. And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he then asked for his logbooks. He showed me. He said, "See, I was flying Hurricanes, and we were using cameras and stuff like that. And I never saw the Japanese." And he says, "I hear in my logbook, I still remember the figure, 471 photo reconnaissance sorties. So I never saw the Japanese." So I advised Nehru not to do it because, we would not see the Chinese. I said, "Sir, but do you realize?" And he'd been CNC Eastern Command, as Air Marshal Vartaman also would know that, he should have known better. But the fact is that at that point of time, since the army was not allowed to go into NIFA, maybe the CNC had not gone himself. I don't know. But he categorically said that the Chinese can come in from anywhere. I said, sir, no, that's not the case, because in fact, I landed up arguing with him. And in fact, Dipti was telling me, why the hell are you arguing? Just listen to him. I said, sir, there are passes there. They have to come through these gaps. They can't pour in, unlike the Arakans where, and there's so much of vegetation in the Arakan. Yahan pe to there's just no question. In fact, sir, I don't know. One of the facts which came out later was that even the Seahawks and the Elysees had moved up to Gorakhpur. All the Air Force pilots had been making forays. They've been driving into the areas, looking at targets, working out what has to be done, etc. And the Chinese also terrified of the Air Force being used, because when they were planning the night before the attack of the Namkachu, and they had actually been lugging up anti-aircraft guns onto the Thagla Ridge. Because you see, it's a great loss that we didn't use the Air Force. Because you see, even Jaggi Nath, who has just passed away, sir, who got a double MVC, and I was very fortunate. I spent a lot of time with him. In fact, he released my 62 book in Bombay. And he used to say that he would take off from Agra in his Canberra. He used to cross over at KK Pass. He said, I was zigzagging that area inside out. He says, not once did they ever launch a fighter sortie against me. And there's a reason for it. They didn't have aviation fuel. They were under a lot of stress as far as all that was concerned. Now, to make things even more interesting, a MiG-19 or a MiG-19 pilot had actually defected to Taiwan. And the Americans had handed him over to BM-COL, not BM-COL, to the intelligence, Malik. And Malik had complete knowledge of the fact that they did not have enough aviation fuel. Even for that flypast in Lhasa, they had to really scrape together fuel to be able to do that. Now, I don't know why SP engineer, who was the chief CAS said that, did not overrule this, because obviously it was discussed with him as well. And Malik did not want the Air Force to be used, though he was goading Nehru to ask for the US Air Force to come in, which absolutely made no sense. In fact, Nehru written that ridiculous letter on the 19th of November, asking Kennedy for American squadrons with American fighter pilots. And what's wrong with it? That, according to me, is the ultimate low point of the 62 war, where the Prime Minister has written that letter to Nehru, to Kennedy. Now, so had we used the Air Force, I have no doubt in my mind. I have flown with the Air Force. I know exactly I've flown with them even in Kargil. I'm not talking purely theory. I've seen it. Had the IAF been used in 62, sir, I think the story would have been absolutely different, including Ladakh, where the Spangur Gap, the transport pilots were landing at Trishul. One of them, his son was my classmate, Anupam Sarup. His dad, Inder Sarup, was flying a Fairchild packet. We landed there. He says, Kunal, we could see 200 vehicles on the Spangur Gap side. And we had already loaded up. All you needed was napalm, so just knock the daylights out of them. They had no defenses against the Air Force. All this talk about bombing Calcutta and Madras and all is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, they wanted Tezpur aircraft to be blown up at Tezpur. I mean, it is good thing. Now, coming to anyone reading Life of an Hindustani is likely to be left wondering what your real passion is: writing, filmmaking, wildlife photography, or fishing. I want to seek your view on an aspect of filmmaking in India. Looking at the extravagant blockbusters Bollywood turns out, they don't seem to be lacking resources or technology vis-a-vis Hollywood. Then why is it that our producers have not succeeded in producing a single world-class war movie all these years? Why do they make a mockery of what they call war movies with all sorts of chest-thumping melodrama, invariably romance? I don't believe in the rhetoric that Indian audience only watch movies with music and melodrama. In that case, how come Hollywood classic like Saving Private Ryan or A Bridge Too Far is well received by Indian movie critics? My feeling is that they just don't want to put in the necessary. I'll tell you why. As a youngster, I remember reading of an interview given by the movie mogul Raj Kapoor. The question why he was producing only formula movies and not something of better class. His preposterous response was, "We sell dreams people want." I thought the interview should have countered the argument by asking, how do they know what they want unless they give them a choice? After all, until Maruti 800 hit the market, engines were only about ambassador theatre. So, what do you say about
So, firstly, we have produced one very good war movie. It was called Hakikat, and it was based on the '62 war, and it had quite a it was not a bad film. It was a pretty realistic kind of a movie, Hakikat, way back in 1962. Uh, but yes, sir, this is a huge problem, and in fact, this was a problem we also faced when we made Salt of the Earth. In fact, I referred to it in Hindustani. Initially, when I was looking at putting together this whole doing this documentary film, I was called by the deputy chief of the army, and he said, I won't name the gentleman, but he just said, "Ki get a couple of voluptuous ladies into the whole thing, and you got your film." And I said, "Listen, sir, this is not exactly what we want to do." And he said that
Bye bye. Long back. Abhi long back.
crosstalk. Yeah. So it's a pity because I had written this other book, Long Road to Siachen, and a film producer from Bombay actually rang me up, and I was visiting a friend of mine in Pune. He came to visit me there, and he wanted to buy the rights for my book, and he was offering me a hell of a lot of money, by the way. And I just over dinner I asked him, "How do you plan to handle it?" And then I realized the story was more about Bana Singh and his wife had nothing to do with the Siachen operation. So by the time he finished telling me his version of what had happened in Siachen, I said, "Why the hell do you want to buy the right for my book? I'm sorry, I'm not giving it to you. If you want to make a mockery of it, please go do so." And the point is, sir, I think filmmakers now are coming up with slightly realistic stuff also. There have been some we are not lagging behind in technology or anything, so or even in funds. It is just that we don't seem to take it seriously enough. And you see, every time you're talking about a war movie to anybody, my 62 book and 65 books have been discussed with a few people to be converted into films. You have these youngsters sitting there in this discussion, and they are talking to you about, they're throwing jargon at you. In fact, they don't understand what the hell are you talking about. Because eventually it's a war movie, whether it's Saving Private Ryan or whether it's a Band of Brothers or whatever. It's about the human emotions. I mean, it's and so in war, in war you don't need to have romance as the only emotion which is there. I mean, comradeship, your battalion, your squadron, your platoon. I mean, every bloody thing. Those are bonds which are far greater than anything anybody can. Unfortunately, I don't think our people have somehow focused on that enough.
Yeah, they don't seem to have grasped it.
Yeah, that's a pity. It's a pity, and I really feel that there is a huge void there, sir. In fact, when we did Salt of the Earth, the first Air Force film, I was faced by this very big dilemma. Not just
We have
me and
screened
my wife.
We have screened that movie on our Colors of Glory forum.
We had to take a call that do we use actors as Air Force officers or do we use Air Force officers as actors, to play the roles of people. And though actors, my wife being from the Film Institute, etc., she was saying, look, Air Force guys are going to ham it up, which in some cases did happen. But I always felt that, the whole body language, the way they talk, this thing, at least that will be natural. You know, you may get some deadly looks and, looking in the distance kind of a thing. I was happy we used Air Force officers, and though it had, we could have gone a bit more smoothly, I suppose, but, in my opinion, it works, sir.
At times they get tongue-tied, as you.
The other point is, even for actors to play soldiers, you just can't ask them to fly in from Bombay into the location and say, all right, wear a uniform and do this. I think they need to spend at least a month, 2 months, 3 months in a boot camp, understanding exactly what is there. Unless you sweat and when I made the NDA film, the Standard Bearers, this was my only comment to the committee, which was initially deciding who's going to do the movie. I said, look, I know nothing about the NDA. I want 1 year to do the film because I need to understand the institution. Without understanding the institution, I'm not going to shoot this film. And I'm not going to enact anything. And that's what I did. And today, Standard Bearers is considered one of the classics. So, these things work.
Now, I think I've taken too much time because people are waiting for them with their questions. I mean, they're just small two questions. Your encounters with wildlife that keeps coming up in life or in the sun that make for an enchanting reading. Would you have any plans to make a new movie on wildlife now that wildlife conservation has been on the top of the town after the elephant whispers?
So we are working on this alternate value education program where we have 12 books. So 3 have already been done on the Northeast. One is on Tamil Nadu. There's 2, one is planned, half done on Karnataka, half done on Kerala. So that is the regional books. Then we have 4 on Indian wildlife, but they are books, they're not films. And the first one is North and Northeast. Second one is Central and West. Third is the Southern Peninsula. And the fourth is the most exciting of the lot. And since this is for schools, this has got tremendous value. It's the islands and the continental shelves. In our country, we don't even know what the continental shelf is. And we have the capability of over the years of actually filming that. So we have got some incredible footage out, and we are putting all that together. And then the 11th book in the value education is the Trans-Himalayan region. And the 12th, you'll be happy to know, is the Illustrated Military History of India, which is going to be probably be released by the 15th of August as a standalone book to start with. It's shaping up, even if I may say so, it's shaping up really superbly. But let's see how it eventually comes.
Yeah, the last question I wanted to ask was,
I'm too old now to make a wildlife film, sir. I mean, and I'm also probably a very lucrative target for a man-eating tiger also. He'll get 2 meals out of one for 1 kid.
yeah, the last question I wanted to ask was about this value education program only that you're working on. So I think you will skip that, which you've already said what you're coming out. I think I'll because I've already taken a lot of time. We all would like to ask some questions. You're most welcome. I'm sure you will be happy to answer. I mean, the house is open. You can, Vignesh, you can unmute everybody if you have muted them. Question on. Yes.
You're muted, sir.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Shiv, what is the Chinese reaction to the 1968 Nathula Chola skirmishes? That I would put it.
So when again, I think it comes back to the same point that how accurate are we in our reporting? There were 2 battalions involved in the initial skirmish, which was 2 grenadiers and also 18 Rajput. The whole problem with the Nathula thing is that, again, they were making a movie on it, Paltan, and there was an army officer who was their consultant. He was from Hodson's Horse, Anil Bhatt. He rang me up and he said, "Dekho, tumhara Paltan hai, ye wo, you have all the details." I said, "I don't have all the details. I haven't researched it, but I do know a little bit about what happened." And so he says, "Okay, so let's start discussing this." So he starts off by saying, "Okay, so 300 Chinese were killed." So I said, "No, I'm not sure about that. I mean, how can you make a statement like that? He said, no, that is the thrust of the movie. The 300 Chinese were killed. Now we work backwards from there." I said, "I'm sorry, yeah. You already made up your mind that 300 Chinese soldiers were killed. Then, what the heck are you doing? Then you are trying to fit the narrative to suit a predetermined kind of a script." Nathula was a very important clash because it broke the myth of the 9-foot Chinese. You see, the fact is that when the initial attacks, whether it in Ladakh, it was we held the ground, but we had withdrawn eventually. But the fact is that in Nifa, battalion upon battalion had broken. I mean, not only in Namkachu, but even in Sela subsequently, as well as in Bombdila. And there was absolute panic. So that hangover of 62 was certainly something that needed to be broken. And 2 grenadiers and 18 Rajput, by their action at Nathula and the subsequent fighting that happened at the other 2 passes, Jalepla, there was some firing, and here, it at least showed one thing, that we were not going to break the line. and we were not going to run away again. And I think so. This is something which got very seriously underlined when I actually filmed the Kargil War. I was shooting it I just went up and I offered to do it. Nobody paid me for it. I was not representing any channel. I just shot the war, and eventually it was my version, which was even shown to Bill Clinton and stuff like that. The fact is, and this is the point I was making on Kargil the other day, I didn't see a single Indian. It didn't matter which regiments. He could be, or which arm. Forget about the soldier, even the porters, the Ladakhi porters, the truck drivers, when the truck drivers were everywhere, everybody was moving forward. Everybody was there, and everybody was carrying the tricolor on his shoulder. That was a fantastic thing to see. And I think 67 is where that thing actually started. It's been a slow process, because even for everything has played a role. Even cricket matches have played a role. Even 83 winning the World Cup, suddenly we were looking at the tricolor in a different way, So in the evolution of this country, and we've had a terrible colonial past and all kinds of things, it's taken time, sir. But by the time we've come down to 1999, and I think the seed was sown in 67, even the 65 war was against the Pakistanis. It was not against the Chinese. So in 67, we learned a way. It was a major thing in self-esteem. Then Sumdrong happened in 86. And then, we have whatever, maybe the eventual analysis of what actually happened in 2012 and what happened in 2020. The fact is, our line has not broken. That, I think, is very, very critical. And Natullah was the key there.
In war, the truth is the first casualty. Like you said, there are 2 battalions in Natula. There were 2 battalions similarly in Chola, where my battalion was also there.
Yes, sir.
The 11 Gurkha rifles and the 10 Jack rifles. Well, not controversy is there between us, the 11 Gurkha rifles and the Jack rifles. Fine. We will not talk about that. I wanted to know what the Chinese felt about it, and did they accept the fact that we were posing a threat to them? And unlike the 62, wherein we ran, or shall we say, are supposed to have run away, we stood grounded, both the places. Did the Chinese take it seriously?
I'm not privy to what they were thinking, sir, but I think they learned a lesson. One of the things the Chinese have always reacted to. I was not privy to this incident, but I'm aware of it because when I wrote General V.K. Singh's autobiography, I was his co-author. There was this, he talks about it in his book, where we wrote this whole scene, this episode where somewhere near what later was Doklab, that area, there was a Chinese patrol which had come in there, etc. And there was this usual standoff, the usual dakam-daki and all that kind of stuff. And then this young captain of ours, this Chinese major comes and he grabbed this pole which said India and China, and he started shaking it and saying shift it and all that. So this guy just quietly caught him by his hand, and the Chinese was yelling, and this guy just didn't say anything, and then he just said, "You move that pole and I'll shoot you." And even though you're not carrying weapons, but the fact is, he said, "I'll shoot you." And the Chinese just backed off, and according to General VK, they never came to that area again. So you have to stand up to these guys. And I think when in Natula, the fact that we stood up to them, the message to the Chinese leadership was that, okay, these guys are not going to break the way they broke in 1962.
Thank you. Thank you.
So may I, sir?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Mr. Verma, first of all, it's been fascinating listening to you. I am a veteran, Colonel Sundar. I've served both at Demchok and NJ 9842 in Siachen. Now that Colonel Krishnaswamy had brought up this thing of what was the Chinese reaction, Natula is still there with us. Again, hats off to you for bringing out the mental attitude of General Sagat Singh, because it was General Sagat who was there in 1967. And he said, I am a divisional commander, I will not give up Natula. But whereas his neighboring divisional commander, Gyayav Jalapla, which is there with the Chinese. So this point which you brought about, I will lead you to the question now. 1980, we had off Falcon, and the Chinese again blinked. We didn't. Now, as you brought out brilliantly, every 20 years they test us. It's happening again. And we need to have people like General Sagat or maybe maverick commanders who will carry the battle to them and tell them what's to be done. We, on the diplomatic line, we are talking tough, but on ground, we are not doing it. I posed the same question to General Narasimhan a few days back in a thing as why is it that this is being done and we are not taking a tough line against the Chinese? There still doesn't seem to be an answer to that, Mr. Verma. With your in-depth knowledge of what all has been happening, what is it that we need to do now to ensure that this psychological pressure is not lost what has been built up? What happened at Galwan was an instantaneous reaction, but we need to back it up with government policies. What do we do now, sir?
So when this 2020 trouble began, I had just moved up to Kulu at that time. And I carry a somewhat fancy designation with the Sunday Guardian, where they call me their national security editor, though I don't know why they do that, because I've hardly ever written. But I wrote this series of 8 articles for them at that time about how and why and what was going on with the Chinese. And I talked about various things in the first 7 episodes, where I talked about intelligence, I talked about various other things. Basically, what I was saying was that we need to stand up to them, just as you just very rightly pointed out. The 8th article is available on the net, and I can share the link with you after this session is over.
Love it, sir.
I had written an article called Target G219. All right. Now, in a sense, what I've said in that article is very simple. I've said that, look, the Chinese are getting very jumpy about the fact that our artillery guns have been moved. We've blacktopped the big old airfield, and that buffers are there, and we can now target 32 kilometers of the highway, which is on the Shasgam Valley side on the across the Karakoram highway. If they're getting jumpy about 32 kilometers, why not? Why not actually, sorry to use this term, I know the ladies present, but why not screw them on the entire 4,000 kilometers of G219? So I've actually said that, look, what we need to do is stop parading our bloody missiles in Rajpath during Republic Day. Whether it's a tactical missile or whatever it is, you line it up and you tell the Chinese, we are in Dehradun, we are in Kulu, we are in this place, Simla, and you get funny with us. You come into any of the valleys, whether it's here or there or wherever, we will take out G219. We'll hit you with everything we've got. And that is what Shastri proved in 65 when he expanded the battle. So why are you hesitating now? And it is a deterrent. You're not saying you're going to do it. You're saying, all right, you come into the Bumla region, you come into the eastern Bhutan, you come in anywhere. We will retaliate. We reserve the right to retaliate. Now, this article came out, and Sunday Guardian is generally fairly well respected in the PMO and stuff like that. So I got a call from the editor, kept ringing me up and saying, have you heard anything? Has the PMO reacted to this article? I said, even if they do, they're hardly likely to tell me. But the interesting thing was, that evening, I get another call from one of our chief of bureaus in Sunday Guardian, getting very excited. And she said, guess what's happened? And I said, what? She says, the Chinese have banned the Sunday Guardian. And I believe this is the second time they've done this. The first time there was in 1953 when they banned the Blitz in Bombay. This is the second time they did it. So suddenly, everybody was aware, at least the powers that we were aware, that that this article had led to the barracks. So maybe it was read. I would like to believe that that is the we really have. I mean, how are you? You have to match these guys in your own way, but you can't, because they are as your external affairs minister said it on a public forum. He's a bigger economy than I am. I'm hardly likely to finger him. That's what he said. But the point is, Pakistan has done this for decades. I mean, the deterrent of a nuclear bomb. Here you're saying, all right, we've got this. And if missiles, these are deterrents. And you have to play to your strength. And you sit down there and you say, look, you get funny with us, we're going to take you out here. And what are we scared of? I mean, that whole 9-foot Chinese myth, which, Karan Krishnaswamy just now referred to, and we broke that in 67. Now, if you're going to go back and hide under the table again, then you might as well have capitulated then. I mean, so the fact is that we've got to stand up to these guys, and we have to face it. They are driven by just one thing. the Chinese simply believe in this one dictum that there cannot be two tigers on one hill.
Hmm.
So they, whatever they do is best at, and it's so easy for them. You see, they're sitting on a plateau. On the face of it, they're at 17, 15,000 feet, both high. But they don't have the problems we do. The southern side of the Himalayas, because of the rain shadow, for us to move troops laterally 35 kilometers, we have to pull them back to the Assam plains and then go in again. Or, whatever. A lot of work is now happening in developing the areas, etc. But the southern side of the Himalayas will always be very fragile and very difficult to work on. The guy sitting in Lhasa can hit you wherever he wants. So you have to have something to hit him back with. So deploy everything you've got. In fact, a very senior opposition leader, I won't name the gentleman, he rang me up the next morning. He said, "What are you doing? You're advocating nuclear war." I said, "No, sir, I'm not. I'm simply saying, use it as a deterrent. Why should a nuclear missile only be a deterrent? Why not even a short-range Agni or whatever, And you are saying we will not go for first use. You do anything, you
That's
come.
a policy.
That's what I feel, sir.
So, very brilliantly brought out. With all these inputs, you well researched. But why did the military commanders and the political people give up Spangur Gap, Razinla, and Razangla with nothing to take back from them during these core commanders' talks? It was a tactical and a strategical blunder rolled into what? There's been no answers. I was very critical of General Panag. I used to think that he was anti-Indian. But in retrospect, after everything was rolled out, the government has been blocking information not only from the veterans but from the public, and we may pay the price.
Yeah, so half the game now is, as I said a little earlier in this program, is misinformation. We really don't know what the hell's happening in Ladakh. So let's be very honest about it. There have been certain, on the face of it, timid. We were caught napping. We had no business to be caught napping in 2020s. There was a major exercise going on. We knew they were pumping in troops. We knew they were doing all kinds of things. We thought, pandemic hai, kuch nahi hone wala. We didn't react. You see, what we had learned in 2012 was that if they get funny with you in the DBO area, you move in here. You go and sit down in Chumar. And the moment you do that, you see, the Chinese play to a script, sir. Their whole system is based on that. Your moment you start taking that script slightly teda, he doesn't know what to do. Okay, so it's a fact. I mean, you have all served, you have all interacted with these guys, and you know the terrain. So I mean, even like you say you served at NJ, that Chalunka and all that. So the very fact that we
That is
didn't
my
give
course.
back, we didn't give back CP to the Pakistanis as we always did. And today we had such a huge strategic advantage where we actually looking down from Tortuk literally at the shock exploding into the thing. So we are actually, we tactically it is up to our military leadership to convince the political bosses, because they are the ones who eventually have to green flag everything. If we withdrew from the Kailash range, then it's the army's failure to have communicated the importance of not withdrawing from there in that case.
Sir, my last question, I do not want to take too much of the time, but it's very rare you get an opportunity to talk to somebody of your depth and brilliance. One simple question, they need inputs to make the right decisions. Why isn't, or the Chief of Defense Staff is not part of the CCS who gives advice? It's only Ajit Deval who seems to be giving, he might be a brilliant man, but who's to give advice to the political establishment to make the right decision? And people like you and others should come to get the military inputs. He's not, the Chief of Defense Staff is not even on the Cabinet Committee of Securities. This is a shameful state. Obviously, they will make decisions like this. Or the military brass, I'm very sorry to say, doesn't have the spine to say this will not happen. Like General Sagat told his co-commander, I mean, one thing I'm writing this thing on General Sagat, and I will request my Captain Ramchandran to let me speak on this. One was that he told his co-commander, I will not vacate Nathula. As a divisional commander, don't tell me where to put my posts. And second is, when the push came to the shove, they said, you need to take Indira Gandhi's permission. He said, I don't have the time. And he opened artillery fire against the Chinese. I do not know. This is, again, something that I heard. And fait accompli, the orders came later. That is how we were able to pulverize the Chinese in 1967, sir. So why isn't the Chief of Defence Staff part of the advising committee, sir?
Sir, firstly, there are two things here. One, the decision to open fire the artillery at 1967 was actually taken by the battery commander himself. He's an Anglo-Indian chap, and the country owes him a huge debt. Unfortunately, they don't even know his name. There were two Anglo-Indian officers. One was the forward gun position chap, and one guy was at the actual GPU. Anyway, that is not the point here. The issue here, sir, is actually, I think, a little different. The Army command, in my view, and correct me if any of you think I'm talking rubbish here. The Army commander is actually more powerful than the chiefs. The chief is the chief of staff. He is not an army commander. Now this permeates all the way down. Whether it's Sagat Singh as a divisional commander or a corps commander or whatever. If you're the corps commander, your area of responsibility is this. It's your call. You're the army commander. I mean, the heck with everybody else beyond a point. I mean, if I'm the army commander in one particular area, and if I feel that this is in the overall interest of the situation, because I got to answer. I mean, I got to carry the can. And army commanders, even by the Army Act, even by the legal point of view, everything are actually more powerful than the chiefs. The chief is only whatever you do, CDS, CA, whoa, that is a separate. The other problem, and we are talking very frankly, and let me say this: we do not have a border policy. In fact, as part of those 8 articles, I've talked about this. We have, you have the ITBP looking after the thing. You have ITBP, wonderful guys. Okay, I mean, they are very good troops. Right here, where I'm living where I'm talking to you in Kulu, I've got an ITBP battalion right here, number 2. I see them. They're good troops. They're excellent people. But there has to be some sort of a coordination between the army and these forces. I mean, we are, you've got your home ministry controlling something, you've got something happening. So today, Manipur is on fire. All right. Today, you are in deep trouble, let me tell you.
Sir.
We don't, you see, over the years, we have actually been fiddling around even with the Assam Rifles. It is the Assam Rifles, one of the finest paramilitary forces in the world. But whether they would qualify for that statement today, I'm not sure. You see, if you remember, in 2009, there was a proposal to raise 45 battalions of the Assam Rifles, right? And they were supposed to take over the Myanmar border entirely.
Okay.
That would have given you your situations are changing. We are not in the 60s and the 70s where they were one road, etc. The government had certain resources. Even the insurgents had to move along certain trails. Today, sir, everybody is moving. Everybody's got communication. Each guy's got this blasted thing, which is it's just transport for different things. So your challenges are different. But in 2009, you talked about raising 45 Assam Rifle Battalion. Then you pussyfooted around. You said BSF, then you said ITBP, you said this, that. The end result is today, with Manipur on fire, where you have a major problem with the Kukis and the Meiteis clashing all over, you don't have the force levels.
Yes.
You don't have the force levels. I mean, you should be, and you see what, hopefully they will handle the situation.
Anymore? Yes.
His camera is frozen, so maybe something on his end, the internet connection.
And it's not that these problems are not known.
Sir.
They've just not been addressed because of turf wars. So long as you have these turf wars, you're going to be in trouble.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, may I ask?
Any more questions, sir?
May I ask something, sir?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Mr. Verma. My name is Aparna. My father was in the Air Force, and my father's youngest brother was in the army. And in '62, he actually died in the Chinese War. And in fact, you have mentioned him in your book, 1962, the war that was. It's on page 176. You've mentioned him. His name is there.
What's his name?
Lieutenant A.S. Subramaniam. He was with the 51 Mountain Regiment.
Right.
And my father was in the 4th Squadron at that time, in the wartime, during the time. But that was just I just wanted to make that comment. But I also wanted to ask you, I'm a civilian, so my question might be very stupid or silly, and you and the other, learned veterans could correct me. Is there any way for us to get back our position on the Chinese, what the Chinese have taken away from us, maybe pre-62? Is it too presumptuous to assume that we can never attack them, or we will never take that risk of attacking them and reclaiming that land which belongs to India? Is it very presumptuous of me to say that the government should do something like that, or is that a possibility of ever happening or never happening? That's my question, sir.
Ma'am, if you're referring to the, firstly, even I'm a civilian, by the way. I'm not exactly, ma'am, if you're referring to the Aksai Chin as the major
Yes.
chunk of land, I don't know. I mean, the only way you can get it back is diplomatically, which would be militarily, it's virtually impossible, because you see, there are no targets there. It's just one massive wasteland. And what do you really do? I mean, I'm talking purely from a tactical point of view. Even if you look at the lay of the land, the upper half of the Aksai Chin is known as the Karakash. That is the area bordering the KK. And then there's a ridge coming down on which the Shyok River sort of takes a bend and comes. So you would have to be actually attacking upwards. You're going from 15 to 17,000 feet. You can't use armor. You can't do anything up there. It has to be a diplomatic thing. And for that, what is our real position? What is the claim that we have? We have to stop talking with twin voices. Now, I'll just tell you something else. I mean, I've just come back I have just had a meeting with the Arunachal governor, and the chief minister last week. And one of the things which we are talking about is that, there are two loops on the eastern border, which is known as Fishtail 1 and Fishtail 2. Air Marshal Vartaman would be familiar with that because he was CNC. Now, do you know that these are actually they are actually Indian territory, right? But what happened? And they're Indian territory for two reasons. One, if you look at the watershed, these areas are nicely inside our area. Secondly, they are traditional Mishmi hunting grounds. And there was no link with Tibet as far as these two things. There are three passes there which control this. But in 1963 or 61, I think, the Indian government gave the maps to the Chinese showing this as Chinese territory. And nobody noticed it. And now, the army maps today are showing Fishtail 1, Fishtail 2, Army and Air Force maps still mark them as our territory. But even on that cigarette packet, India King, you'll see those two little indents on the thing. So our right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. And these areas are remote. Okay, fine, whatever it is. But it is, you have to constantly study and figure out what has to be done. As far as the Chinese are concerned, I actually feel that it is not really in their interest in the long run. Now, when I'm talking about the long run, I'm talking about 50 years. I'm not talking about the immediate future. Sooner or later, it's all going to be a matter of markets. It already is. And I don't think it's going to really serve China's purpose to stay on an antagonistic path with us. And then it's really a question of how we leverage ourselves and whether we can diffuse the situation. But then the Chinese have problems with 14 countries and they have borders with 14 countries. So the problem is not so much on our side, the problem is on their side. And we just have to play it tough. That's the only way you're going to get it.
So two quick questions. One is the Kenzemane grassland patch in our territory now? Because that's where my uncle died and I'm planning to visit his regiment sometime in July. So I wanted to know if that's in our side now, or is it now under the control of the Chinese?
Kenzemane is where the river comes in, man.
Okay.
The Yangtze from the other side.
Okay.
I think right now when I went there, I didn't get beyond Zimitang. But I think if the army, you would require the army to take you there, because beyond Zimitang, I don't think they allow anybody otherwise also, because it's too sensitive, that area.
Okay, because my uncle's regiment is now called 51 Medium Regiment, and they are in Chardwari actually right now.
Chardwar बहुत पीछे है. I mean, they'll have to. Kenzemane is literally like
on the border
post. That's where the Dalai Lama came. Yeah, Dalai Lama came in from there.
Right. And in terms of the psychological wars, in the media, from what one reads, it seems like the Chinese have the upper hand in terms of the narrative, that they're putting out. Why is it that we're not able to sort of strongly oppose it or, put our way forward saying that this is the real situation? Is it because the government wants to control everything, or is it to our advantage that the government is controlling it, or is it that they've lost the plot and so they're controlling the media? What's really the situation, sir?
Ma'am, I think the problem is a little deeper. Actually, it's a very good question, because the problem on the Indian, I see myself not as a journalist. Okay, I mean, I haven't worked for any organization apart from very short stints. So I've always been a bit of an independent, free bird kind of a thing. The problem with us is most of our defense correspondents and stuff like that really haven't got very few of them have devoted enough time to study the problem. One thing you realize if you want to get into this business is that how little you actually know. People can call you an expert, but I know exactly on a graph of 10, where exactly do I stand. And the other problem in India is that the moment you've been on TV 2-3 times, you start thinking you're bigger than the subject. And then you start giving yarn. We simply have not had enough people giving it enough in-depth study to be able to write about it in a systematic way. Government cannot control narratives beyond a point. Government will always only try and control their narrative. We have to look at the national narrative. And for that, you need people. And especially a lot of veterans who have served in that area, etc. They also have to actually break out of a shell. They have to stop thinking Army, Air Force, whatever. They know the thing, but they are colored by the fact that, they're conditioned that way. They are told that you're an apolitical army, you're not supposed to comment on this, you're not supposed to do this. There was a comment about General Panag being considered anti-national, a minute or so ago. I don't think so. I mean, here is a man who's actually, I don't agree with a lot of things he says, but it's legitimate. Let him say what he wants. And if you have the arguments, you should be able to counter them. This is not an argument. You're a Pakistani agent and you're this, you're that. Because how else do you have a dialogue? He's been a Northern Army commander. He has certain perceptions. It does not necessarily mean that his perceptions are absolutely correct. And take him on. So you need a higher level of understanding and education. And that, unfortunately, at the moment, I know a lot of youngsters who are really striving hard to become good defense correspondents also. They keep talking to me and asking me for help, and I'm always very willing to share whatever I can with them. But I don't think, on a scale of 10, even if you're looking at China, I know my knowledge is minuscule. And, the day you stop, the day you start thinking that you know everything there is to know about it, it's not going to work. Because the situation is changing so rapidly, in any case, you have to stay really abreast.
So just finally, I work as a high school counselor, so I will, through Captain Ramachandran, perhaps connect with you to learn about the program that you're doing at Welham Boys School. Perhaps there's something I can do.
Invite you, ma'am. Please send some of your children. It's in October 5th and 6th.
Okay, sir. I'll take your email ID from Captain Ramachandran and write to you. Thank you so much for answering.
We are also doing the same military history thing this year in Assam Valley School as well.
Oh, right. Okay.
That is going to happen in December. So now we're going to run it from two sectors. One is Dehradun and one is this way.
Okay, so I'll send you an email requesting information, and then I'll speak to my principal and get back to you for sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for answering my questions.
So one last question,
Sure.
may be permitted, sir.
Sure.
Why don't we play or finger the Chinese with the Tibet card, sir? Or is it too late?
Again, I can get you.
Why don't we finger the Chinese playing the Tibet card, or is it too late now?
So the Tibet card is actually been on the table since the 1950s. Okay. One of the reasons why the Americans have aligned themselves with Pakistan and done everything, etc. I mean, the great game has continued in many ways. Earlier, it was the British and the Russians. After World War II, the British were replaced by the Americans and the Russians were replaced by the Chinese. But the game has continued. The Americans have always looked at Tibet as the soft underbelly of China. And it's a different matter in 1959 when they went into Xinjiang, etc. We should not have, that's a separate issue. At that time, General Karyappa, when he was asked, can we militarily intervene? He said, I can spare one infantry battalion, for Tibet. Now, the point is, opportunities have come, opportunities have gone. But I don't think India, in the post-colonial period, so we are forgetting a lot of things. When I was a kid, Colonel Krishnaswamy refers to, me playing in the IMA, this thing, and I'm referring to that period now. A transistor radio in your house used to determine whether you were an affluent family or not. You know, we were a hand-to-mouth country. We had starvation deaths, we had famines, we had all kinds of things. So, you know, for us to have grandiose dreams that we could have done this, we could have done that, maybe it was not possible. And today it is also a tendency to paint everything with a black brush. Nehru's time ye hua tha kharab hai. You know, it's not necessary. Even though I have been critical of the Prime Minister in my own book in 1962, I have always said that we would have never had Nifa or Ladakh in our possession if it wasn't for his forward policy. There were certain things which he certainly did right. Whether the implementation was right or wrong is a separate issue here, sir. Now, whether we can finger the Tibet card now, I don't think so. And I think the Tibetans themselves, and I'm talking about the Tibetans in exile, they have also long given up the dream that anything can happen on this front. Because one thing is now clear. You see, frontiers, we've been through a whole transition period. Frontiers was first defined by people like Curzon. And we know around the first Bengal partition in 1907, etc. Uske pehle, what was frontiers? I mean, when Tibet, they said these are pastures. This will take yaks. This is ground. This thing. We'll take goats. You have bakarwals. This is yours. You know, there was nothing defined. But today to change territorial integrity anyway, I don't think it's possible anymore. I think Bangladesh was the last time it actually happened. Uske baad kahan hone wala hai? Let's be realistic about it.
So why I asked this query is when I was a young captain, I served with SFF. So there appeared to be some possibilities at that time, but as you rightly said, time has rolled on, and I wanted this. I wanted to reinforce whatever was in my mind, and you, reinforced it. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure interacting with you.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Is the emotional planning to ask something?
I'm amazed at Kunal's knowledge and
knowledge, I know.
military history, the terrain, to everything. Amazed, Kunal. I just have to give you a salute.
Thank you, sir.
A very, very interesting discussion.
Well, you've been CNC East, so I, with the G219 thing which I had referred to, what's your view on that?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, when in the East, as far as the East is concerned, the Air Force definitely, to my mind at that time, we had the upper hand. We definitely had the upper hand because the Chinese Air Force was operating from a plateau, which is at 4.5. Many of their airfields are at about 4.5 kilometers. So they are terribly limited by the fuel that they can carry, the weapons that they can carry. And we were in we are in a terrific position. That is one. In terms of you talked about the valleys and that they can come from the valleys, we were focused on that. One of the things which we were all the time looking at it was the QTR, the Kinchai Tibet Railway. Because when they built the QTR, they built it in such strength and engineering marvel that they can move their troops to their missiles to anything rapidly in the QTR. So we had identified specific areas where we can kill the QTR. We can, let us say, put it out of action. So these are the areas which we used to look at, and you could not hit bridges because the bridges were so strong. We didn't have weapons that could, it'll just probably make a, spec on that. So we identified areas where we can, do a landslide, go and hit it on top, and the whole damn thing comes down, and we shut down that QTR. So these were the areas which we were targeting. The other thing that we were also, what do I say? The go. Let me say the go. You can't, start reacting and start doing things when that fellow has crossed that river. What is that river there? The Brahmaputra. What is that which in China?
Tangpo, sir.
No, not that river. So we had at that time said that the moment the Indian movement has started to cross that, then we have to act. It's too late to act if they've already crossed and come down the crossed and come down towards our borders. So these were the things which we were looking at. And when we were looking at weapons, because we had the Sukhoi squadrons and all, we were very certain that we can actually degrade the the way they can get into the valleys. Because I'll give you an example. If you take a Sukhoi, he can carry 34 bombs. If you're carrying, and if I put a long delay fuse, which can cover that area, and 4 Sukhois go in, they can create havoc. You cannot just come into the valley. So it's very, to us, our mind, it was very easy. And General Bikram was the army commander at that time. So we worked on many of these things at that time. So the G219, yes, it's a very, very crucial link of theirs. But now that they are expanding further east, actually, they've gone well past towards Kunming and all that areas.
Yeah.
But you haven't written about the QTR.
I know. I haven't.
It's a marvel.
I don't want to give away. Anyway, they shouldn't be reading my book and figuring out what's coming. But they're a very interesting race. So they are. It's. I think the more you study the Chinese as a people and you try and understand their psyche, you realize exactly how difficult a situation you're really facing, because they are thinking at a different level from us, which is, unfortunately, we don't have that long-term ability to. I think it's got a lot to do with Hinduism. So the fact that हम जब मर जाता है, जला देते हैं, भस्म हो जाता है, is gone. So we are happy within our own space, and we are not really looking long-term. I'm just joking about that, but the fact is that you really do have a problem.
But what you said also, when trade and economy takes priority, all this will probably go in the background, and for them, that's most important.
Eventually, yeah. Eventually, it is. That's what the whole game is all about, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's also important for us not to get sucked into the American basket beyond a point, because nobody has ever come out of being in bed with the Americans, in a happy frame of mind, because you always land up getting the short end of those things. So you have to really play your card very carefully.
Having interacted with the government in many places, in many of my positions, the Indian government, what I found, is always wary of the Americans across the board. You can see it in all their thinking and everything. We are very wary, and thank God we are wary. Even to sign that one particular document, I keep forgetting, we discussed for 3 years. And including those stupid commas to whatnot for 3 years, because we were just not willing to join up with them. So that wariness, I think, irrespective of which is the party in power, we are very wary of these fellows.
Thank God for that.
Thank God for that. Thank God.
These kind of guys can let you down anytime. Like it happened in Afghanistan, just left and ran. So Vietnam, everywhere. Any more questions, gentlemen? Yeah, I'm sorry, Kunal. I think I overshot by half an hour. I promised. Hope won't be enjoyable with us. Thank you very much for a very, very.
One last question, sir.
Yeah,
I just knew a scheme that is coming of having Agniveers. Does that?
What? You asking me to comment on the Agniveer thing?
You're muted, Aparna.
No, I just wanted to know what that disadvantage us if we have any more skirmishes with China in the future, having troops that, under this scheme, would it disadvantage us majorly in any future skirmishes with China in the future, sir?
Ma'am, firstly, I think the Agniveer scheme is let's just be very frank. It's a political little drama, and it does not impact the entire army or recruitment or anything of the sort. Just a fraction of it. You already had the short service thing and stuff like that. So, at a very basic level, all I can, from a point of view of a civilian who's looking into the system from outside, the only thing is that it takes you a year and a half or so to train a soldier, to have him reach green horn capabilities. Even when he has done 1.5 years of service in the battalion, they used to say, Abhi bacha hai. Till about 5 years, nobody would even give him any job other than go and whitewash the stones and paint the stuff. Now, here you've got a guy, 1.5 years of service. He joins, I mean, he's now coming into what we consider as a combat arm. But, things are also changing. Let me say that, because we are now getting perhaps more technical. Maybe the same yardsticks don't apply, maybe. But in the overall scenario, where is the shortage of people who were wanting to get into the armed forces? Where was the shortage? You have a fully professional army. It's not just the Agniveers. I think even this whole business of tampering with regimental systems, etc. It's may not be that. These are things which, just because they're colonial, I equally detest the colonial tag and anything to do with that period. But the fact is that you have to now see it from your perspective, and you have to build on your strengths and not necessarily go against it. If even this whole business about cantonments and defense land, for no other reason, but purely environmental reasons, I would say, for God's sake, leave them alone. Because they are lungs in your cities today. What the hell are you doing? And surely our top brass somebody needs to stand up and say something. But we keep getting these decisions thrust down on us, which we are told was extensively discussed in army commanders' conferences. But the point is, where is the logic? I mean, you first have Agniveer, then you have this and you have that. I mean, you have to start thinking Fortress India and what's good for it. And unless people are willing to stake their reputations and say that, look, this is right, this is wrong, you will continue to have these kind of things happening.
Thank you, sir.
Correct.
Yes, sir. Subramanian sir, you're saying something?
Totally correct. Totally agree with Kunal. Absolutely correct.
That was a wonderful interactive meet. Kunal, thank you very much for sort of being with us. We all really enjoyed it, and we look forward to some of the opportunities in the future. And wish you all the best with your program. And see, this is the book, ladies and gentlemen, his latest work. I've just finished reading it last week, as I said. A wonderful piece to read. I mean, it's crazy, fast. I mean, it's sort of, you relax, you can read. I mean, it doesn't tax your cerebral cells. I can actually get it.
Brilliant book.
Brilliant.
Thank you all for having me with you, and it's been a pleasure to be here. Of course, my Chennai connect is always right there, and even Tamaram being, is such an integral part of my own life now that I can never even think about MCC without getting emotional. So anyway, thank you again for having me, and it's been really nice interacting with everybody. Ma'am, do get in touch.
I will do, sir. If you are hosting any events in Bangalore, please let me know, sir. I live in Bangalore, so I'd love to volunteer and help in any way, so if you're hosting any event.
Ma'am, right now I'm living in Kulu. I've got a project in Arunachal, and you can imagine what's happening to me.
I'll get in touch, sir, definitely. Yeah. So should I play the national anthem, sir, Captain?
Yeah, thank you very much. So please, Aparna.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you
Good
so
night.
much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Captain Sir. This was wonderful today. Wonderful talk. You're such a good speaker. Yeah.
Yes. Very
Yes.
enjoy. I
Yeah.
would say one of the best we have had. Huh? Brilliant.
And the longest and the most interesting one.
Very
Exactly.
interesting. Very,
And,
very.
And I think his memory of the locations and the places, I mean, I was just astounded. I read the book many times and I still forget, but he just has it all, I think, in somewhere there. You know, it's amazing.
yeah,
He
I
knows
should thank
the
you
landscape
for,
so well.
Marshal, I should thank you for putting me through to him. I didn't know him personally.
Welcome, sir. Welcome. In fact, that book is worth reading, you know. I mean,
Yes.
it is something which we have lived through. It's not, you know,
No,
200 years ago or something.
somebody remarked in the note, you know, it doesn't fit into any genre. You could call it a travelogue, autobiography, adventure book, anything.
No,
That's
no,
why it's
I must share with you, you know, I used to think the ultimate job, okay, is to be a fighter pilot. But I think this guy beats me because you imagine, you just see the life he has led.
I know.
I mean, you
It's
name it, he's done it.
quite a roller
He's
coaster.
led an extremely exciting life.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing which he's not touched. You must read this book. You then realize, what is this guy doing? There's everything he's done.
I've just ordered the books actually after both you and Captain Sir mentioned it. I've just ordered it. I'll hopefully get it by day after tomorrow.
I mean, in fact, it's a good thing that he defied his dad and
Yeah,
joined the army.
absolutely. Dad was very disappointed. He didn't join
Yeah.
Rajput, to
As far as,
Rajput.
as far as his father was concerned, you join army, you'll go to hell.
That his father was, I think, prisoner of war. I think that is the one that is
Yeah, he
deterred
has
him
written,
from
he has
going
written
anywhere
a book on the this 4-corps operation in the Rivers of Silence.
Hmm.
That's the book he has written on
near. I
1970.
think experiences of his father must have definitely made an impact on his
Yes, yes,
father.
no doubt. He
Yes,
he wrote it for his father, actually, this
So
book.
since he was there, I didn't say I'll just this what do you call it?